There is a version of life that looks stable from the outside, where income arrives on schedule, bills are paid on time, and small comforts quietly fill the space in between. Yet beneath that surface there is a pattern forming, subtle but persistent, where each financial decision feels reasonable in isolation but collectively builds a structure that becomes increasingly difficult to escape. And this is where the middle-class spending trap begins, not as a dramatic failure of discipline, but as a slow alignment between lifestyle and income that feels natural while gradually removing flexibility. At first, the increases are small and almost invisible: a slightly better apartment, a more reliable car, subscriptions that promise convenience, and occasional upgrades that feel justified after effort. And none of these choices are irrational. In fact, they often represent progress, but the system quietly adjusts as fixed costs rise to meet income, leaving little room for error. And over time this creates a financial environment where maintaining stability requires constant continuity rather than optional choice. Psychologically, this pattern is reinforced by a sense of earned comfort, where spending becomes a reflection of identity rather than necessity, and each upgrade carries an emotional weight that makes reversal feel like loss, even if the numbers suggest otherwise. So instead of evaluating decisions purely on long-term outcomes, the mind begins to prioritize consistency of lifestyle, which slowly shifts financial behavior from strategic to habitual. Mathematically, the trap is less about how much is spent and more about what remains, because wealth does not grow from total income but from the gap between earning and spending. And when that gap narrows, even a high income can behave like a constraint, since the capacity to invest, absorb shocks, or take opportunities becomes limited. And this is where two individuals with similar earnings can diverge dramatically over time based not on income, but on retained capital. If income increases by 10% but fixed expenses increase by 8 or 9% alongside it, the net gain appears positive but functionally changes very little, because the margin that fuels long-term growth remains thin. And over extended periods this small difference compounds, not in the form of exponential gains, but in missed opportunities, where capital that could have been working quietly in the background is instead consumed to maintain the present. Zooming out, this is not simply a personal pattern but a systemic one, because modern economic structures are designed to encourage continuous consumption, offering upgrades, financing options, and frictionless spending mechanisms that make higher living standards accessible immediately rather than gradually. And while this creates short-term satisfaction, it also aligns perfectly with a cycle where income feeds lifestyle, and lifestyle demands continued income, reducing the space where independent financial momentum can form. The result is a condition where progress feels constant but distance remains unchanged, where effort sustains the system but rarely transforms it. And over time this can lead to a quiet form of financial fatigue, not from lack of income, but from lack of movement, where each year looks slightly improved but structurally similar to the last. The shift out of this pattern does not come from drastic restriction or sudden change, but from a reorientation of how increases in income are treated, where instead of allowing lifestyle to expand proportionally, a portion is intentionally held back to widen the gap, because it is this gap that creates optionality, and optionality is what gradually converts stability into flexibility. In the end, the middle-class spending trap is not defined by how much someone earns or spends, but by how tightly those two forces are coupled. And the moment that connection is loosened, even slightly, the entire system begins to behave differently, allowing time, rather than constant effort, to take on a greater role in shaping financial direction.